They thought firing me would be the end of the story. They were wrong. My name is Julian Mercer, and what happened in that boardroom in Chicago 3 days ago changed everything. But to understand how someone who had been with the same company for 25 years could be publicly ridiculed and then turn the game around against a Fortune 500 CEO, I need to tell you about the silver pen in my pocket and that phone call I made 72 hours earlier. Let's go back to when things got out of control. The red tulips were intact in my hand, waiting outside the meeting room. A small gesture, I said to myself. A bouquet to welcome the new CEO Evelyn Drake. 25 years at Novacore Global had taught me that respect matters more than titles. I wanted her to feel like she was joining a family, not a company, on her first day. But the moment I entered the room, the energy in the air changed. Evelyn pouted. She didn't even look at the flowers. Instead, he straightened his tie and said with a clarity that filled the room, "Julian Mercer, your time here is over." His words didn't register in my brain at first. The two newly promoted vice presidents sitting at the table were sitting calmly, as if they expected me to argue. I looked at Evelyn, looking for a wry smile, a sign of a bad joke. But there wasn't one. He dragged a yellow file envelope towards the polished area on the table. His eyes were glazed, as if I wasn't there. Everything in my mind froze. 25 years of late-night phone calls, of operations that saved supply chains, of inspections that I constantly dodged. It all collapsed in one brutal moment. No thanks, no goodbye. Just a cold, surgical incision. Then Evelyn leaned forward, her voice filled the room. "This," she said, pointing at the envelope, "is the beginning of a cultural shift. Novacore must now leave behind the traces of the past. And Julian's departure will symbolize that change." At that moment the deep silence in the hall continued. I could feel everyone's gaze on me, not with the respect I was used to, but with pity. The tulips in my hand drooped, suddenly they looked ridiculous. I put them on the side table. The smell was heavy and the air stale. If you love stories of corporate warriors who don't give up, who get up again even when they fall down. And if seeing how experience silences arrogance feels like sweet justice to you, hit like and subscribe now. Because every day I share a brand new story, more exciting than the last. At that moment, I picked up the envelope on the table. My fingers touched the silver pen in my pocket. It had been given to me as a gift in my 25th year and it had my name written on it. The silver letters shone in the fluorescent light. I squeezed the pen, trying to stabilize myself against the feeling of shame inside me. But there was something Evelyn didn't know. Something that no one in that room knew. 2 days ago, I had taken over a majority stake in the company she thought she controlled. Novacore Global was now mine. How could no one have known about this, I hear you say? Please keep listening. Evelyn straightened her back and looked around the room, celebrating the triumph of her show. But what she didn't know was that this scene would be remembered in the future not as her triumph, but as the birth of a spark. 2 days ago, before he was humiliated. On Sunday evening, on a quiet night, my phone rang. I didn't want to pick it up. The rumors about the new CEO had been occupying my mind for weeks. I was trying to quiet my mind with a book. But when I saw the name reflected on the screen, my hand locked. Samuel Warden. Samuel wasn't just the founder of Novacore Global. For many of us, he was the company itself. He had retired years ago, tired of endless battles with investors. Yet his presence still lived on the marble walls of the building. When Samuel called, you'd answer the phone. "Julian." His voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who didn't waste words. "I need to see you." Minutes later, I found myself in his oak-clad study. The smell of leather and tobacco hung in the air like a calm from the past. Samuel was sitting behind his desk, an organized stack of papers in front of him. The first thing I noticed was the same sharpness in his eyes, a look from those times of crisis, when everyone else was 5 moves behind and he was thinking 10 moves ahead. He pushed the papers in front of me. "It's time to offer the future of this company to someone who really deserves it," he said. For a moment I didn't know what he meant. Samuel, you mean? He didn't let me finish, he leaned back in his chair. I'm transferring 46% of my last remaining shares to you. The words didn't immediately register in my brain. For 25 years I had fought to keep this company intact. But I had never imagined that one day I would own it. My heart raced. This was either salvation or the most ingenious trap in history. Samuel opened his drawer and took out a silver pen. Carefully, almost ceremoniously, he handed it to me. This pen, he said, was in my hand when Novacore's first contracts were signed. It is not just a pen, it is a sign of trust. If you sign, Julian, you will no longer be an employee. You will be the soul of this company. I examined the pen. Its weight felt like a responsibility in the palm of my hand. My name would no longer just be on a file on the walls, but would be etched into the very foundation of this structure. And why me? I asked. Samuel took a deep breath and spoke. The board is circling like vultures, he said. I know who is loyal to the company and who is loyal only to themselves. You have sacrificed more than anyone else, often more than anyone expected. That's why I trust only you. I felt a knot in my throat. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Samuel was right, sometimes it just takes patience to see people for who they really are. When I signed my name, Samuel's gaze turned serious as the silver tip of the pen glided across the paper. I'll add one more thing, he said. We'll keep it secret for now. I want to watch how people behave when they think you have no power. Their arrogance will give them away. Then, you won't just be defending yourself. You will be determining the future of this company. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just about ownership. It was about understanding who people are when they are unmasked. And what I would learn in the next 48 hours would change everything. 2 days later, Evelyn Drake would walk into Novacore and think she was in complete control. But what she didn't know was that that signature in silver ink would make her a guest of the company. The morning after Evelyn Drake's announcement. On my way back to the office, I was carrying not tulips, but an empty cardboard box. As I walked down the office corridor, each step felt longer than usual, each silence heavier than usual. Conversations stopped when I passed, not out of malice, but out of the desperation of people who heard that something unjust was happening. When I entered my office, the curtains were drawn halfway. The light fell on my desk in thin lines. The desk where I had spent so many years was now like a familiar but foreign face. Folders full of successful project photos and crisis reports. My coffee mug, cracked on one side, but which had accompanied me for dozens of nights. The small bronze paperweight gifted to me during the port dispute in 2017. And my black leather portfolio that had traveled 3 continents with me. I could see my colleagues behind the glass walls. Some were trying not to make eye contact, others were looking at me with a sadness they could not hide. I knew that look, a combination of pity and desperation. Like the look the workers at the port gave years ago when the goods got stuck at customs. You have done everything, but the result cannot be changed. As I folded my jacket that had been hanging on the back of my chair for years, memories came flooding back. The sleepless hours at airports. The early morning phone calls because of strikes. And most of all the day of my father's funeral, a moment that still hurts me. I was in the war room of the operations center, in front of walls lined with maps. Millions of dollars of shipments were at risk because of a snowstorm. I convinced myself to stay there. I said, saving the company would be what my father would have wanted. But in reality, I was only easing my own conscience. That day I was in front of the monitors, not in front of my father's coffin. And I have never forgiven myself for that. Now, as I looked at the faces behind the glass, I had this thought. They could erase me with a letter, but not the life I had dedicated to this company. Their signatures were temporary, but the traces I left were permanent. I was about to close the lid of the box when my phone rang. Owen Tate's name appeared on the screen, a man who had weathered years of storms with me in the supply chain. The message was short but clear. No one here has forgotten you, Julian. Not now, not ever. The word sat in my heart like a heavy but peaceful echo. Shame gave way to quiet pride. As I packed my things and left, I felt a sense of peace. Because I realized that those who really mattered had already seen, remembered, and respected me. But another thing I learned that day is that it is not always those sitting at the meeting table who remember the value of a person. Sometimes, it's the people who stay up with you, who put their hands to the wheel. And therein lies the real loyalty. Thursday morning. The walls of Novacore Global were now filled with a different echo, a cold, robotic, non-native voice. I wasn't in the huge meeting room that day, but rumors were flying through the company corridors like a storm. Evelyn Drake was having her first big meeting with her management team. And it wasn't just a plan, it was a show of force. I later learned that Evelyn entered the room with such confidence. It was as if she had bought not only the room, but its contents. Not a smile, not a courtesy. Every word was sharp, every step calculated. "The time for sentimentality is over," he said. "This company has been carrying the weight of the past for too long." When I heard that sentence, something tightened in my heart. The weight of the past. That was Evelyn's nickname for me. She referred to my 25 years of experience as the weight of the past. Like a piece of pipe, rusted, a relic to be dismantled and discarded. In those years, it was patience, foresight, and sacrifice that saved the company from going under. But he referred to all these things as burdens. In my chest, anger manifested itself slowly but deeply. I could accept being replaced. But I could never accept being ignored and treated as if I never existed. Evelyn continued. "We will make deeper cuts. Departments bloated with emotion will be simplified. Risk management, audit, logistics will all be rebuilt. Efficiency, not loyalty, will be the determining factor." His words were like a knife. But what was more painful was the silence in that room. Some of the executives sitting at that table had called me brother for years. Now they saw it fit to keep their heads down and remain silent. Their fear seemed more intense than their conscience. But a twist of fate. That day I received an unexpected message. From a young analyst I had mentored years ago. He was in a meeting, pretending to take notes and secretly recording with his phone. And he sent me this message. "Julian, you're gonna want to hear this. So they don't think they're off the hook." There was an audio recording attached. I pressed play. Evelyn's voice echoed in the room, arrogant, condescending. "Old infrastructure," she was saying. "Relics like Julian are dragging us down. His departure will be a symbol." The recording was clear. Undeniably clear. This was not a joke, not a gaffe. This was condescension in evidence. I held the phone in my palm. As anger coursed through my veins, something else emerged in me, composure. This was no longer a matter of humiliation. This was proof. Evelyn had given me her own weapon. Like a knife forged from her arrogance, a weapon that would be her undoing. Because I knew. She thought she had silenced me. But in reality her own words would echo her forever. And without even realizing it, Evelyn had handed me the key that would destroy her temporary kingdom. Friday morning. The air bore the brunt of the approaching storm. The Novacore Global Board of Directors had gathered in the huge boardroom on the top floor of the building. The gleaming wood on the 20-meter table reflected the cityscape filtered through the ceiling-length windows. That room was designed to generate fear, and today the owner of that fear would be replaced. Name tags were lined up on the table, but one stood out in particular. Reservoir, majority shareholder. That seat was empty. Empty but unsettlingly meaningful. Some board members were trying to hide their curious looks. Pretending to sip their coffee. Others were leaning in and whispering to each other, wondering. Who is the new shareholder? At the far end of the table was Evelyn Drake with her confident stance. She checked her files, noticed the looks around her. And began to speak with a confident smile. I can assure you that the new investor is fully aligned with my vision. His absence today is a mere formality. His absence is a silent confirmation of the decisions made. His words filled the room, but no one was fully convinced. The presence of that chair was a symbol. And it was certain that someone would sit in it. But no one yet knew that person was waiting just outside the building, behind the glass doors, with a silver pen in her hand. Inside, Evelyn had started her presentation. She was changing graphics on the screen, talking in big words about reform, about a vision of the future. Her voice still had that same arrogant tone. We are now free from the burdens of the past. Novacore will be more agile, faster, sharper. Success loves speed, he said. Through the frosted glass doors, I could see silhouettes like shadow plays. Someone leaned in, someone nodded. And each time Evelyn's voice rose, the people around that table got a little smaller. Today begins a new era for Novacore Global. The time for clumsiness, for clinging to the past, is over. Her voice floated through the walls, cutting through the room like a knife. The executives at the table nodded, seeming in an air of obedience mixed with fear. They were all pretending to curry favor with Evelyn. Just then the secretary appeared in the hallway. She had a thick file in her hands and a worried expression on her face. She headed for the door with quick steps. When she entered, the buzzing in the room suddenly subsided. The woman handed the file to Evelyn and spoke in a low voice. The ownership files were updated this morning, ma'am. I was watching from outside. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the edge of the file. Her face froze for a moment. Then she put on her familiar mask, raised her voice with a fake smile of confidence. You don't have to worry. The new investor shares the same goals with me, we will move together with the same vision. But something had broken in that room. The echo of his sentences was no longer convincing. His pupils had shrunk, his shoulders tensed unconsciously, his body language was out of sync with his words. The others at the table sensed it. That something was changing. But they didn't know what yet. I held my breath outside. I waited patiently. The most expensive lesson I learned in my entire career was this. Good timing is more powerful than power. One step at the right moment is worth 100 steps at the wrong time. Inside, Evelyn's voice rose again. We are now shedding the weights of the past. Novacore will be a forward-looking company. The old order will disappear. She was repeating the same thing as if she had memorized it. Just then the secretary came in again. This time with a phone in her hand, her face as white as lime. He stood in the center of the room, his voice trembling. You have to see this. All eyes turned to him. The executives reached for their phones. Evelyn's face fell. And then the same notification appeared on their phone screens. As of Tuesday morning, Julian Mercer held 46% of the voting shares of Novacore Global. This update supersedes all previous entries. It must be recognized immediately by the board of directors. A deathly silence fell over the room. No one even breathed. Chairs creaked, eyes narrowed. And the color slowly faded from Evelyn's face. In a few seconds, panic replaced triumph. She was the woman who thought she controlled everything. But now she was no longer the one running the room. She was just watching herself fall. At that moment I took a deep breath. It was my time. I pushed the door. The glass doors opened with a heavy silence. All eyes turned to me at once. The sound of my shoes echoed on the polished floor. No one spoke. I kept walking. Slow, calm, but steady steps. The silver pen in my hand caught the light. All eyes were focused on that little glint. But that pen was more than a symbol. He was now the key to control. Evelyn's eyes widened. She took a step back. Her voice cracked. This must be a mistake. I didn't say a word. The silence spoke. The entire board understood who was in power. I walked over to that chair to the majority shareholder seat. and the final silence fell over the room. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. The whispers that began behind the frosted glass doors disappeared as soon as I stepped inside. My footsteps echoed. Each one carried the weight of 25 years, the sound of patience. Everyone at the table turned to look at me. No one said anything, but the same expression on everyone's face. This is impossible. I kept walking. The silver pen in my right hand caught the light. That pen was no longer just a souvenir, but a seal that would rewrite the fate of the company. Evelyn's voice cracked. This must be a mistake. The files are wrong, there's a mix-up in the system. I didn't say anything. I just stopped. And I allowed silence. Because sometimes silence is a sharper answer than words. Evelyn tried to speak again. But her voice was no longer the same confident tone. SEC records are inaccurate. Julian Mercer has been fired, he has no authority here. I kept my eyes on her. The air in the room grew heavy. Executives fidgeted in their seats. Some averted their gaze, some held their breath. Everyone realized that the balance of power had shifted in seconds. I came to the chair marked majority shareholder. But I didn't sit down. I stood for a while, looking into Evelyn's eyes. The silence was like a needle. And finally, I broke the silence. Competence ends where ownership begins, Evelyn. My words were low in tone, but each one was heavy as lead. The mood of the room suddenly changed. The faces of the board members began to unravel. One of them, an elderly director, who had been silent for years, put his hands on the table and spoke with a clear voice. Let the record show. I vote for Julian Mercer. Another nodded, then another. And then the silence gave way to a determined chain reaction. One by one, everyone repeated the same decision. It was like a domino effect. Me too. Me too. Me too. The color drained from Evelyn's face. She put her arms on the table. But she didn't even belong on that table anymore. Her eyes turned to me. A mixture of anger, fear, and realization. I took the silver pen out of my pocket. I put it on the table. The light reflected off the pen. And the little click as it touched the table was the loudest echo in the room. This pen, I said. The day Samuel Warden gave it to me. It didn't just carry ink. It carried the soul of this company. I pulled the file on the desk in front of me. And signed my name. The sound of the pen sliding across the paper announced the end of an era. No one spoke. Evelyn remained in her chair, her hands shaking. I spoke calmly. From this day forward, Evelyn, you will report to the values of this company. Not to me. At that moment, everyone on the board held their breath. Some were surprised, some relieved. After a second or two of silence, a pair of hands clapped. Then another. And in a few seconds, the applause that echoed through the room became a sound of justice that had not been heard in years. Evelyn bowed her head. She did not resist. She knew now that the game was over. But before I left, I turned and spoke one last time. This company doesn't need leaders who show off. It needs hearts that protect it. This sentence echoed off the walls. No one said anything additional. Because everyone understood. As I walked out the door, my heart felt lighter than ever. I felt no anger, only peace. Because justice doesn't always shout, sometimes it just enters the room at the right time. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If these words touched you, if they stirred something in you or made you reflect on your own journey, I ask only 3 small things. Like the video so others can find it. Leave a comment, share your story, or simply tell me what struck you the hardest. Subscribe because more stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what's ahead.